Welcome to video number 5 in our fractions unit of the iPrep for Intro to Epi. At this point we have discussed fraction basics, finding common denominators, simplifying fractions, and adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing them. Now we will look at more ways to express numbers and transform fractions into decimals. Before we get started, let's look at some definitions. A ratio is a relationship between quantities. We will work with these more in the 2x2 table section as decimals, but they can also be written as fractions or using a colon. A proportion is a type of ratio in which the numerator is part of the denominator. In other words, the top number of the fraction is part of the whole population represented in the denominator. Most of you will be familiar with percentages, which are just proportions multiplied by 100. Then we have rates, which are ratios that involve a measure of time, like 100 new COVID cases per week. Converting fractions to decimals is generally easy, and if you're converting to decimal form, there's no need to simplify the fraction first, because the actual value stays the same. Because fractions represent division problems, all you need to do is divide the numerator by the denominator using a calculator. Now before we continue, here's a quick review of decimal places. Rounding appropriately will be very important on your EPI exams, and your homework and exam questions will often specify which decimal place your answer must be rounded to. To the left of the decimal we have our whole number, but everything to the right represents the portion of the whole, or the fraction. Remember that the first place is the tenths place. You should be good from there. Hundredths is next, thousands, etc. Usually you'll be reporting answers to anywhere between 1 and 3 decimal places. Let's try a couple of examples here. Make sure you have a calculator handy and take a moment to pause to see if you can convert these fractions to decimals on your own. So 4/6 to a decimal is basically just saying 4 divided by 6. So you plug that into your calculator, you get something like 0.666666667 all the way to the end. Say you have to round that to the hundredths place. We know this is the tenths place, this is the hundredths place. This number here is greater than 5, so we would end up with 0.67 rounded to the hundredths place. For the next one here, we have 115 over 232, which is basically just 115 divided by 232. We need to convert that to a decimal. We plug it into our calculator. Then we get something like 0.49568.966. Now we want to round this to the thousandths place. This is our tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So we look at this number here, which is greater than 5, so we're going to round up. We end up with 0.496 as our final answer. Now, converting decimals to fractions can seem a little bit tough, but if you know your decimal places well, you'll be in good shape. First, you start by writing the decimal as a fraction over 1. Then you multiply the numerator and denominator by 10 to the power of n, where n is the number of digits after your decimal place. To review, 10 to the n power is just scientific notation in which the n indicates the number of zeros after 1. So, for example, 10 to the third power, which would look something like this, would mean 1,000 because there's 3 zeros here. Let's look at an example. Take a moment to pause the video, see if you can convert these decimals to fractions. For this first one, we start by putting 0.225 over 1, and then we're dealing with 3 decimal places, So we want to multiply both the top and bottom by 10 to the third, which is 1,000. So that gives us 225 over 1,000. But this can be reduced using greatest common factor, which looks like it might be 25 here. I'm not going to go through them all, but let's start with 25 to reduce this. And we end up with 9 over 40. Now this looks like it can't be reduced any further, so I think we got it right. So this is our final answer here. 0.225 is the same as 9 over 40. Now for this next one, we'll start by putting 0.85 over 1, just like before. So what do we want to multiply the top and bottom by? We'll do 10 over 2 because we're dealing with 2 decimal places here. 10 to the power of 2, which is the same thing as 100. So then we end up with 85 over 100. Now we'll want to reduce this again. Greatest common factor looks like it's probably 5. So this becomes, let's see, 17 over 20. And that's our reduced answer. So there's a shortcut here if you haven't noticed. Once you understand the concept, if you're comfortable with the name of the decimal places, like with 225 here, we have tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place. Once you have that down, you'll be able to run through these a little bit easier because you would know that this decimal 0.225 is said 225 thousandths. So once you know how to say it, you know 225 thousandths looks like this. So knowing those decimal places turns out to be your shortcut to get here, and then you just have to simplify. This allows you to skip a whole step in between. So to recap, in this video we learned how to convert between fractions and decimals. We also reviewed decimal places and scientific notation. These concepts are frequently used in Intro to Epi, so it's important to feel comfortable with them moving forward. In the next and final video for this section, we're going to review some percentages and combine some of the concepts we've learned through videos 1 and 5. Thank you.